Hello everyone, today I will discuss the comparison study of stabilization works using sheet files made of reinforced concrete steel vinyl. Presented by me, Snamban Ronald Maron M, BS Civil Engineering. This presentation is comparison study on the use of sheet files as protection in normalization works of the river embankments against gorging. In this study briefly describes the use of sheet files as soil reinforcement of the embankment of the river against landslide. This naturally results in many landslides of river banks that generally occurs during the rainy season. So there is several the stabilization works on many river sites in West. Okay, now let's talk about sheet files and reinforced concrete steel vinyl. The use of sheet files for slope on river basin have been carried out in many countries. Stabilization of the water bodies can be done with sheet files application are made of various materials. Materials that can be used as sheet files are steel, reinforced concrete, vinyl fiber, reinforced polymer, and woods. Every sheet file material has advantage and disadvantage. Sheet files of woods, for example, must be treated to protect against rodents. Reinforced concrete materials is relatively rigid than other materials. Steel sheet files walls can be planted as a cantilever with a depth of up to 8 meters without anchor, while the vinyl sheet files is relatively dry and shorter than steel, which is just up to half of it. Okay, moving on, as you can see in the figures, these are sheet files and vinyl sheet files on how they are installed in the ground. Okay, moving on the different kinds of sheet files. Sheet files can be driven at some distance from the river, slow, like shown in the figure 2, or in the direct contact with the slope of the river in the figure 3. Those differences are strongly influenced by the behavior of the soil condition on the site and the hydraulic behavior of the water in the river basin. For water bodies with relatively slow without scorching potential, and the installation of the first type is more desirable. In contrast to the flow tends to scorch the river banks, the sheet files with the second type installation is technically more helpful. In addition, beside the construction method, the sheet files application need also environmental related consideration, function, and good looks of the rivers for the presence of the sheet file instructions in the area. For example, of the environmental consideration is the installation of the sheet file by in the figure 4, presenting vegetation to make it look more natural and friendly with the surrounding. For locations that have good soil properties, the structure of cantilever sheet files is usually enough. This presentation is comparison study on the use of sheet files as protection in normalization works of the river embankments against gorging. In this study briefly describes the use of sheet files as soil reinforcement of the embankment of the river against landslide. This naturally results in many landslides of river banks that generally occurs during the rainy season. So there is several the stabilization works on many river sites in West. The project work is decided to use sheet files materials that are made of steel and vinyl. The steel sheet files are driven into a depth of 8 meters. Meanwhile, vinyl sheet files are driven up to 6 meters. The next one is comparison of sheet files. Based on field observation at the construction time, then the installation of work of reinforced concrete sheet files experience more frequently problems than the others. These problems is generally caused by the large cross sections of the concrete sheet files tip in contact with the ground when it's driven. Compared to the concrete sheet files, the steel and vinyl sheet files are relatively easy during installation since the cross-section, the thickness of the sheet files is relatively small. The vibrator machine to drive the concrete sheet files also is a larger capacity than the other. In addition, vinyl sheet files can be cut neatly and easily using simple equipment such as chainsaw, like in the figure 10. The concrete and sheet steel files require more difficult cutting effort. In fact, the project location area that has high level of porosity, the vinyl material is more reliable for this reason. Steel sheet files at several locations have been started and having corrosion process, like you can see in the figure 11, so they needed to be covered by protective paint. Difference in the use of sheet files on the river stabilization projects are caused by the consideration of technical and non-technical. The difference then result of difference in the execution of the work included the cost of each material used. By considering the same decision makers as well as geographical and geotechnical similarities, then the budget comparison using the same unit price can be examined. Table 1 shows the comparison of the cost materials, procurement, and installation of the sheet files application in the riverbank stabilization projects with the different materials. The cost listed above is the cost per meter length of the materials and the installation cost for the sheet files. Steel sheet files are relatively more expensive both procurement and installation compared to others. All through the price of the concrete sheet files is relatively cheaper, but the installation cost is more expensive than the vinyl. The next one is the table 2, shows the cost comparison that installed sheet files on the project site. Due to difference in planning, then the depth of each project, the length of installed sheet files is also different. However, in general, it can be seen that the vinyl sheet file is the cheapest. The steel sheet files is relatively much more expensive compared to the other two types of sheet files. Lastly, let's proceed to conclusion. Riverbank stabilization project can be completed by using sheet files as a construction option. However, the application needed the decision to choose the right types of sheet files that is available. The next one is the project decision maker requires the considering the technical and non-technical matters related to geotechnical and geographical data as well as consideration on site. In the installation process, the vinyl sheet files are related easier and cheaper compared to concrete and steel sheet files. This presentation is comparison study on the use of sheet